Well, Gerald Hector is the Senior Vice President for Administration and Finance at the University of Central Florida. He oversees accounting, finance, human resources, campus safety, auxiliary enterprises, and all aspects of facilities management. And the list does go on, trust me. He joins us this morning to share his journey. Gerald, welcome to Sunrise.
Hey.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
We're good, and happy to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure. My pleasure. It's an honor to be here with you.
Well, you're a bit of a specialist, Gerald. In reading up about you, you have been in senior administration at universities in the U.S. for quite some time. How have you honed and developed this specialist set of skills?
Well, it has been a journey. It's been a journey from there in Jamaica, Kingston College, believe it or not. I loved accounting, and my father was an executive with Sherwin-Williams Paints out there in Central Village, and I was always fascinated with accounting and finance. And I was blessed to get a track and field scholarship to Howard University in Washington, D.C., and I majored in accounting, and I've stuck with it. But over the years, I have been fortunate to be placed in positions that allowed me to grow and hone the skills from public accounting with Deloitte and Touche, and then moving on to be the corporate controller for the United Negro College Fund. And I have what's called a kitchen cabinet of mentors. I have used to be 8 of them, 3 of them have passed away, but they basically poured into me every single solitary day as to what I can achieve. And I've just stuck with it. I've become a sponge. I try to absorb as much as I can. And then one day, after retirement of the CEO of the United Negro College Fund, Dorothy Kauser Yancey asked me to become her CFO at 32 years old. And I've been in a senior role in higher education in the United States now ever since that time.
I'm curious and would love to hear more about the breakdown concept of OATE.
Right. Yes, OATE, O-A-T-E, ownership, accountability, transparency, and empowerment. It's a management ethos that I utilize with everyone that I work with. And they have to understand that if they have a job, they have to own it. If they also be accountable for it. And you have to be transparent with everybody. If you're not transparent, when people don't know, they make stuff up. And unfortunately, you can't have that happening in an organization. That brings chaos. And then the E is just basically empowerment. If you're a leader, your job is to work yourself out of a job. So how do you empower your people to be their best selves every day? So I came up with that a number of years ago, and it just stuck with me. And it seems to work well with my teams.
Gerald, the thing I find fascinating about your trajectory is that, yes, as you said, you started off in accounting, but you're not just an accountant. You're not just a person who focuses on the numbers and stays in a room by themselves with a calculator. You are integrally involved in leadership, and leadership at big institutions. Explain that aspect, your orientation towards leadership, particularly in several academic institutions. And then I want to hear about your orientation into leadership generally. But tell us a little bit about that.
So leadership, it's a really interesting concept. It's lost on many today. But I tell people all the time, servant leadership is the way that I try to lead. Oftentimes we get titles and positions and it gets to our head and we get puffed up. But if you're going to lead, you got to lead from your heart, and you got to be able to be vulnerable. And like I said before, transparent. That is hard for many people today. And you will see them leading and being rather arrogant in their leadership. But if you're able to allow for everyone to come into a space collaboratively, you can get more done that way. And that's what I've tried to do over the years. And as you looked at my trajectory, I started out at a very small liberal arts institution in Johnson C. Smith University with about 1,500 students. And I've gone all the way up to Ivy League Cornell, and then all the way now to the University of Central Florida, where we're the largest university in the state of Florida and the second largest in the nation at 70,000 students. I tell people all the time, it's a matter of scale. If you can lead well in small things, the big things just become natural. And that's what I've tried to do over my career. But more importantly, what I try to do is to make sure that I'm bringing people along. I always have a succession plan in mind, and just empowering and pouring into the folks that are coming along behind me or working beside me, because I always want to make sure that if I was to get hit by a bus today, my team can pick up and keep moving without me having to be there. So that's my management philosophy, my leadership philosophy, is that I lead by walkabout, and by walking about, I bring more people along with me.
Looking then at the broader context within which we are having this conversation, we're having this conversation on local government election morning. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share, for instance, on how we can possibly transpose that orientation towards leadership into leadership more generally in politics in Jamaica?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a 1980 was an election year for me as a young man. I had a very harrowing experience. That election year was tough on a 10-year-old, but having to go through some issues, I had a disdain for politics in Jamaica. I really did. Politics in general, and here in the United States, is somewhat, to some extent, it's still the same for me, because what happens is politicians oftentimes forget that they are servants and not necessarily one that lord it over people. But it's the same ethos, if you will, or the same mindset that has to govern, and that is you are there to serve the people. And if you think about the local government elections today, I think this is the first one since 2020, but think about it in this context. All politics is local, and it's interesting to me to watch over the last week or so the campaigns and all the speeches and everything else. But at the end of the day, once you get into the office, you have to remember the people got you there. And the people that got you there, you have to serve them in every way and every capacity possible. And I think if politicians keep that mindset, they will be okay. But what happens too often, I've lived in Trinidad and Tobago as well, so it's universal. You get the power, and then the power gets to the head, and you forget about the people. You have to focus on the people, what their needs, their wants, and desires are. And every day, your waking hour of the day, you're trying to realize their goals and dreams and to lift them. A rising tide lifts all boats. And I think if politicians and leaders can think from that perspective, they'll be in great shape, and they will have the rewards, and they'll get the reciprocity of the respect, admiration, and love of their constituents. And that's something that's very hard to do oftentimes for many.
Gerald, real quick, you went away, you've excelled, you've done really well. Tell me something, what do you miss about Jamaica, real quick? What
Beaches.
do you miss the most?
I miss the beaches, and I miss the food.
Understandable. Thank you so much, Gerald Hector. Thank you so much. It was so good to have you. Thanks for dropping those gems with us this morning. So that
Absolutely.
was Gerald Hector, Vice President of Administration and Finance at the University of Central Florida. It's time for a break. When we return, we hit the polls with political analyst Dr. Nadine Spence. We'll be right back.